One thing I want to finish up with, and this was your comment to me in the email was that this was probably Ed's greatest night, the Smithsonian that we were all at. Reflect on that. One thing I want to ask you though before we get into it is the ceremony before. Now, when I went as a fan, right, so I got a ticket and it was free to get in. When I got there, we got in line, and I was close to the front of the line. When they opened the doors, we walked in as fans. There was already half the place was full. And I was like, wow, what was going on in here before I got in here? So you guys were in there. Tell me what was going on. What they were presenting these.
Yeah, we actually, there was actually on the other side of the hall, you go in that big grand entryway hall when you go into the Smithsonian there. Yeah. And I think they had, I don't remember if the Batmobile was there or not. Like they had the Batmobile from one of the more recent movies. Mm-hmm. Maybe it wasn't there at the time. I can't remember, but it was on the other side. They had like this kind of like, almost like I'd say conference room type of thing, much smaller, intimate room. And they did this kind of press presentation. So there was a handful of us there, and it was, of course, Alex and his son and Matt Bruck and Janie, and close friends and press. Were there, and that's kind of when they did the formal presentation of both the Frankenstein black and white replica and one of Ed's stealth guitars to the museum, along with a half stack, an EVH half stack, and they had a formal presentation there. We took pictures. I'm seeing you've all seen the pictures. I have pictures. I was going to send them, but they're like the same as all the other ones that are out there. Sure. Where Ed's got his hand on the Frankenstein, he's got the gray jacket on, so that was in that room. Then, of course, we were allowed to go sneak over, like you said, and of course, Alex and all of them took up the front row, but it was like, it was basically the press and everybody got to fill in there before you guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a picture of you guys that was taken that you're sitting behind Alex and his son, and Brad and you guys.
I've downloaded that. I've got that there. It's like, there I am.
There you are. Yeah. Yeah. So we were like, wow, first thing I thought is, wow, and must not have been that many fans allowed to come, to this. Because when I got the ticket, I had no idea what kind of size we're talking about here. So it must have been a couple hundred fans, maybe. And there were 200 other people, maybe.
Well, again, you have to understand this was a very important moment in Ed's life.
Sure.
We talked earlier about him being an immigrant and coming to America, and then being honored by this country, for his achievements and his creativity. I mean, it was everything that Ed loved, right? They were celebrating him not for his, for any outrageous behavior or fights with Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth, right? They were saying, you have contributed in a very substantial way to American culture through your music and your guitar playing. And so obviously Ed was going to have his family there, and he was, wanted press coverage, because he cared about that more than just about anything. I mean, it was a deeply moving evening for him.
Yeah, and I was grateful that I got a ticket. I mean, getting there and realizing how important it was to him, and how big of an event this was. Post even now, I'm still wow, I really was fortunate to be there.
And he was on that day. I mean, he was.
Oh, yeah. I want to add, too, that Brad was supposed to be the host. He was supposed to be the one up on stage there, and that we collectively came up with questions. And I don't want to burst Kevin Dodd's bubble, but Brad came up with the question about the Stiegel movement being a possible inspiration for the stripe design. I think it's, great minds think alike. So Kevin, you came up with the question too, but Brad also was on the same wavelength, and we had provided a bunch of questions to Ed in advance. But I want to give Brad credit for that, because, he was really played a big part in that event behind the scenes that most people aren't aware of.
Right. And it was a beautiful event. And then, we got to meet him at the end of that event, and which wasn't discussed to us, as fans, but I had a good idea that it might be small enough that he might do that. And then it was a very, you mentioned this earlier, Brad, how he liked to interact. It was much more personal in the way that it was like a receiving line where you got to walk up to him, take a picture, and it was more as intimate as it could be for that situation.
Yeah.
I thought they did great with that and how they handled it.
Yeah. We didn't get to talk with Ed. Of course, we had to catch a train back up to New York, which ended up breaking down.
Oh,
and
Lord.
I didn't get home until 3:30 in the morning. So it's like we might as well stayed and talk to Ed after all and just come back the next morning or something, because that was just an ordeal.
Yeah, it was a beautiful.
It's hard though, you realize that there's, like Chris and I have had so many opportunities to speak to Ed.
Exactly.
And, we were sort of like, well, let all these other people who who have never had the opportunity to meet Ed, have their time with him rather than us trying to.
Yeah, we've had our moments with him. It was definitely like we don't need to let these people have their time. Let them have more time.
Well, you guys heard this in the questions at the end. So many people just thanked him for what he did, and that's really like me and a lot of those people, most everybody, just wanted to say thanks to him for all that he did for us. I mean, it inspired an entire career for me, and I'm a full-time musician because of him, which gave me an ultimate amount of freedom to do exactly what I want to do with my life. That's a big deal to me. That's a huge thing for me. And it was
me too. And that was an important point that I made in the tribute, that I wrote to him in Guitar World. That this industry came up behind him. They came up in his wake. I personally, was affected by that and my life path. He set me on that path. I was interested in music before, and but it kind of made me more determined to do that. Sure. My friend Robert, who's the other guy who heard Eruption, and we both were in a battle to see who could learn it first. He's an illustrator, but he's done album covers for Steve Vai. He did backdrop stuff for David Lee Roth. We went from these kids listening to this stuff to actually working with these people.